Hi, I'm Rajiv Menon, and you're watching 20 Questions to Rajiv Menon. When I was a student in school, I used to go for quite a few quiz competitions. And that was the time that quizzes were moving towards visual rounds and things like that. And being a student of Kendriya Vidyalaya IIT, where most of the guys are, very, very clear about getting into IIT. I too was a science geek, but one of us had to be sort of specializing in art or. So it just so happened that we used to go and sit during lunch break and look through it, and each of us would try to be good at something. And I used to pick up and try to find out that this painting looks like this painter, or just to sort of understand. That got me interested in the visual arts, and from there was a time that a lot of changes were happening in cinema too. So I started getting a feeling that maybe I can do something like an applied science, which is cinematography. So I probably pursue that. So while I went and joined physics at Vivekananda College, I also gave a shot at the Film Institute interview. But I didn't think I'll get it, but I got it, and that's been my lifelong passion of trying to find ways of telling stories through images, and I really am grateful that I made that decision. It's a very difficult thing. It's probably as abstract as making music, I think, because there's no one thing. Sometimes it's an incident in a newspaper which triggers you. Sometimes it is some bit of a conversation that you have. Or sometimes it's just something you hear, or sometimes what you see that triggers, maybe there is something inside this idea that can develop into a script. So a script, of course has to have ups and downs and all that, but the audience really gets into the film or the idea with a character. So your character has to be interesting. It cannot be a stock character. So the three-dimensional character is very important, and that is a very organic process. I mean, you need to actually meet that person and sort of feel it. And so, if you're saying that you're going to write a story about a cop, so if you see a cop as what you saw in Singham 3 or Singham 4, it's not enough. You actually got to go and meet a cop. Is he God-fearing? Is he not? Does he got allergies? Is he short-tempered? Is he just calm? What kind of a cop are you looking at? How different is he going to be from the other cops that you've seen on screen? And that newness is what you're going to get. So a cop who is going to Shabarimala, so he's grown a beard, and he's saying Swami Sarvamthalamayam, but he has to whack somebody. These kind of things are kind of gives it a certain character, And I think the more you have character, and the more you think about and feel the person in flesh and blood, then that person's reactions will not be stock. So let's imagine that somebody is walking to his house, and he or she would hear heaving noises in his bedroom, and then he looks at it, and his wife is in bed with somebody else. Then he goes and he opens a drawer. What would happen? What would happen, Sabresh? What do you think will happen? Tension, and probably take out a gun and shoot. That's what everybody's going to say. But if you were to say that person who walked in was 4 feet 8 inches, and he was a dwarf, and he got into his house, and there's this very beautiful woman making love to a very beautiful man, then what would he do? So the situation is the same. The stimulus to the story is the same, but the way the character will now react will be different. The dwarf may probably sit down there, and he'd sit there, and as the person comes in, they say, please don't come to our house, because people respect her, and her name would get spoiled, so don't do it. Just get the fuck out of here. That's what he's going to say. So what I'm trying to say is that the situation is the same, but the way people will react to that situation is based on you having a very clear idea of the character. And that character is, you need to invest time, and you need to really feel you know him before you can write the story. There are films that I admire, but I don't think I want to make, but films that shocked me, and how audacious was the thought process behind it. Like Apocalypse Now. I mean, I often look at it and say, how on earth did they pull this off? I mean, how do they do a film like that? But it's not a film that I may want to make again, you know. Whereas I find some simple film like Story of Kui Ju. It's a story about a lady who, you know, fights against the judicial system in China, which is very simple. And she's pregnant, and her pregnancy is increasing, and she's just fighting for justice. And that's something I always thought, you know, it's very relevant in India. You know, people just trying to seek justice, or, you know, I mean, there are so many films like that. I'm also fascinated by stories about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, like Witness, thrillers. I greatly enjoy comedies, Four Weddings and a Funeral. So I like various things. So there's no one particular film. I don't know. I barely see my films again. I probably just occasionally see a bit of 5 to 10 minutes on Sun TV when they play Kandugunyam, because it anyway plays 3 or 4 times a year. But otherwise, I don't revisit my films. In fact, I haven't seen Minsarakannu in 10 years. So, and like, it's when people tell me scenes, really, is it there in the film? Like, I've forgotten it, you know. It's like a mother who's gone through a delivery. She doesn't remember the agony or the pain of delivery. She only remembers the child that's there right in front of it, you know. It's like you've gone through so much that I'm not a kind of person who lives in the past. I kind of keep looking for the future. So there's nothing that I wouldn't want to remake those films or anything like that. I don't think they're like that great, or, you know, I made it in this way. Let's move on to my next film. That's it. There are films that you like. I mean, I saw Shoplifters as a film in Cannes. I quite liked it. I saw Cold War this time. I really liked it. I like Mother India very much as an Indian film. Tamil cinema, like as a commercial film, I really liked the way Godfather was adapted into Tamil in Tevar Magan. I like Godfather very much. So, as a play, I really like Hamlet, you know, and the way Shakespeare has written it, and it's fascinating. Like, you know, even now, how he pulled it off. It's so complex, the writing, and to understand it, that, you know, Shakespeare was writing it at a time when the Elizabethan era was there, and they were really worried about who's going to take over after Queen Elizabeth. So, this idea of succession and who's going to be in power, and I mean, what will happen if people just keep killing each other, and then the King of Norway from somewhere is come and take over. It's so complex, that whole thought process in Hamlet. I mean, how did he think and pull it off? You know, it's a play that I really like very much, and maybe someday I should put my hand into trying to find out how to remake Hamlet into a contemporary situation. I don't know. I was under the impression I'm young. No, you have made me an old man.
You
but
have to make it in the context of first-time filmmaker.
See, even I have only made 3 films, so I'm not like really qualified to state that. But I think it's important to find your own voice. You know? While you can worship some filmmakers or some things in the past, but you must have the belief that you're going to make a better film than that. You've got to back yourself and believe that you as a filmmaker would do something better than what you've seen. So if you have that idea and you sort of tell yourself that I want to make it different. If this guy is going to make it like this, or that fellow would make it like this, and this fellow would make it like that, I should not do that. I should try doing something new, because the important thing in life is taking no creative risk is the greatest risk. That's what David Ogilvy said. And I think it's very relevant in any art form, you know, is to experiment and try something new. Stories have to have classic structures. It has to have emotions. And if you experiment in the story, it may leave the audience cold. But you can experiment in form and technique, because technique and form keeps changing. Content is largely, you know, good versus evil, and you know, those kind of moral issues are which drive stories are fairly consistent over a period of time. I think it's one that's going to come. I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for the moment that people see Sarvam and say, that, yes, this is my story. I can relate to it. It may be a drama story, but actually I've gone through pretty much the same thing. If I can connect with the people and if people like it, it should be probably my greatest moment. Narcos. I really liked a book called Cuckold. It's by Kiran Nagarkar. It's sort of imagines the world at which Mirabai lived. It's an outstanding book. But the book I read again and again and again is Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces. That's one of the greatest books on mythology and in non-fiction. That's probably my book that I will take into an abandoned island if I have to read it. There are filmmakers who do interesting work, but they also make indifferent works. You really like somebody and then he makes an indifferent film and he makes a couple of more indifferent films and you start unliking him after some time. You feel sad because nobody's good always, especially if they keep making work because they have to work. Their heart may not be in it or they resort to cliches. But as a filmmaker with pretty much the longest reign, which was also very consistent and very edgy and different, was Kieslowski, the Polish filmmaker, made 3-color blue, 3-color white and red. His films are brilliant and they're emotionally engaging as well as artistically challenging. I'm a great fan of Kieslowski. I live in Chennai, so... Marlon Brando was pretty outstanding and different. There are so many good actors in the world now, actors like directors have sort of a 10-year period where they kind of peak in their 30s and 40s and then they start hamming. There's no one person that I can look at and say he's my favorite actor. I'm past that stage in my life where I'm a fanboy. A lot of people who are very talented who suit a certain role and they're really hungry and they try doing something completely different, but after some time, it becomes routine. When I was making a documentary on a Mridanga Vidwan like Mayalpuram Shivraman, I used to see, in his room and some other places where hanging around him was this guy called Tanjavur Johnson. And Johnson Ingaba, Johnson Angapo. Johnson is an important person. So I thought Johnson is a travel agent or he's probably some liaison officer in Tanjavur. And then I discovered that during the concert he's sitting on stage. Who's Johnson? Why is he sitting on stage? And then discover when you go to his house that Johnson is a guy who repairs his mridangam. And then you discover, no, his mridangam was manufactured by Johnson. So who's Johnson? He's the manufacturer. Then I go and interview him and he says that actually my son is studying from Mayalpuram sir and I'm really grateful that he's teaching him and I really hope one day and pray that my son will probably play at Music Academy. But the son is not so serious about Mridangam. He's just doing it because his dad did it. But that thought got me, a man who's making it, he couldn't play, but he's really hoping his son will play. So what if I make a story about a guy from that community who wants to play and what would happen? So it's sort of just one little conversation, one sentence that man said which inspired a whole film. I think it's about, it's somebody like me who's had a relatively, I can't say I'm not a prolific filmmaker at all. I make films once in 3 years, be it as a cinematographer 4 years. I'm not a role model for anybody in terms of productivity. I could be a role model as far as how I lead my life. How I am as a father or as a husband or as a teacher or as a person who runs a business or something of that sort. And to remain interested in advertising and doing advertising for more than 30 years, you got to be living in the present. I think really worrying about the past is no use and getting anxious about the future is no use. It's right about being there in the present. And it's pretty much the same with any temporal art form. And if you're going on stage as a play, you're acting, and if you think, I'm going to screw up a line before, I'm going to screw up a line, you will definitely screw up a line. So also, when you're singing, your worries, your pains, everything just disappears, because at that moment you had to be on pitch and you got to be on beat. So being in the moment, I think, is really important, and not really. And most people are dying of anxiety now and popping pills for 100 things, because they keep watching on social media and getting worked up about the fact that others have got more likes, and so you're putting out information and posts all the time, hoping for getting more and more likes, and if they don't come, you feel worthless. I think it's just a general sense of anxiety has gripped the people. But I think why a person like me continues to make films or gets enough creative fuel and self-belief to come back and make a film is because I just love doing my job, and I'm grateful that I can do this job. And I think people have to realize that, you know, any creative thing you do, and if you can practice your art, and if people can like your work, you have to be grateful for that and not be anxious about it. Mornings. Cooking. Don't make this film. You lose all your money. There's always a different way of shooting it, you know, of this shot. And there'll always be a slightly different way that gentleman I'm going to collaborate with is going to do. He's not going to do exactly what I wanted him to do. And one should not imagine that the other person should do. And if you have that superior air that my vision is better than his, then you cannot work with people. You have to have the thing that maybe I would have done that, maybe he's doing it like that. We can probably suggest, if he accepts, it's fine, but the story is bigger. You know, or frame a little this way, that way. It's not going to kill you. And if he feels strongly about it, let him take that stuff, and then you can request him to take your idea too. So the point is, when you work as a cinematographer or as a director, they're both easy. But when you are doing both, I can't do it, I go mad. I'm very fastidious about my frame, and if I'm panning, I'll be really worried what's happening in the edges of the frame. And if I'm worried about the edges of the frame, then I'm not looking at the actor's eyes. And the actor's eyes discover or reveal the soul of the character. So I think it's very important for us to delegate responsibilities and trust the people you're given the job, and believe that they will put their best, and not keep worrying that they're going to screw up. And if you keep worrying that, then that will actually happen. So all my films, I get somebody else to shoot it, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Lose more weight.
So for further crazier videos like these, if you want to keep watching them, please subscribe to Moustache.